What is up, YouTube? It's your man, That Dude, bringing you guys another video. I'm giving guys subscriptions down below, so go hit that button. I'd appreciate it. Noblesse episode 2. Now, if you didn't watch my video on episode 1, I talked about a lot in that video, just basically how I felt lost watching the show. Like, I didn't understand what was going on, and the show wasn't explaining a lot of the characters and what their importance was to the story and all that kind of stuff. Apparently, that's because there's a whole OVA that this is a continuation of that I had no idea existed. I looked up this OVA. The OVA came out in 2016, 4 years ago, and it's on Crunchyroll. You can find the OVA on Crunchyroll, but they don't advertise this OVA. Like, if you're gonna release a series that is a continuation of an OVA, it would be nice if you also advertise that this OVA exists, or even better yet, readapt the OVA and include it in the series. So they should have made episode 1 the OVA, and then we pick up from there in episode 2 and so on and so forth. But no, they continue from this OVA. They don't advertise it at all. There's no mention of it. Or they could have put like a little brief moment in the beginning of episode 1. It's like, hey, you know, this is a continuation of this. Maybe go check this out. They don't give you any of that. I had no idea that OVA existed. If it weren't for the comments on my first video, I would have just went on watching Noblesse thinking it was a poorly written show from the first episode, or poorly planned show from the first episode, where you don't really get to like know what the hell is going on. But no, that's not even really the show's fault, the material's fault. That is on Crunchyroll for not better advertising that this OVA existed, or readapting the OVA and just putting it in the current anime. That is really on Crunchyroll. They dropped the ball on that one. One thing I did give Noblesse credit for in my video of episode 1 was that the action was fairly decent. Now, after having gone back and watched the OVA and watched episode 2, I have to say that the action is better than decent. It is fairly fluid. The fight scenes are pretty interesting. The abilities that the characters are using seem pretty cool. So I got to give the show even more credit. The action is more than decent. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not God of High School level good when it comes to the action, but that would be an unfair standard to hold every anime to. It seems like the action for this show is going to be good, and I'm assuming it will get better when they introduce more powerful characters who can actually challenge Rizal or challenge Frankenstein, and are just more powerful in their own right. Because right now we've only got like the lackeys from the Union, who Rizal doesn't struggle all to take out, and Frankenstein just doesn't struggle at all to take out. So when stronger characters come in, we'll get to see more of Rizal and Frankenstein's abilities, and the abilities of the other nobles that have come in the show. After having watched episode 1 and 2 and then the OVA, it seems like they really toned down the gore from the OVA to episode 1 and 2. In the OVA, there's a whole lot of blood, whole lot of body parts getting torn off, and just like a lot of blood everywhere. And in episodes 1 and 2 of Noblesse, haven't seen quite as much blood. I hope they don't tone down the gore too much, because I thought the gore in the OVA was actually pretty appropriate for what they were displaying on screen. So if you're displaying somebody's arm get ripped off, or somebody getting 1,000 spikes driven through their body, there's gonna be a lot of blood. So I hope they bring that back in the actual anime, and they don't censor that kind of stuff too much. The need to have watched the OVA is even more apparent in episode 2. Like, episode 2 picks up with events that are every bit as much from the OVA as they are from episode 1. It picks up at the building where in the OVA, Rizal rescues Han and the other students from the guy from the Union. That's where episode 2 picks up. And so it almost seems like the OVA runs directly in episode 2 until you get deeper in the episode 2, and they start referencing some stuff that happens in episode 1. But yeah, like, I can't stress how important the OVA is if you haven't watched it. Now, I'm assuming everybody watches. I was apparently the only person who ever seen the OVA, for the people who jumped in my comments on my video about the first episode, saying that hey, you gotta go watch the OVA, or this is a continuation of the OVA. Which again, I appreciate those comments, because without those, I would have been lost watching this series. But again, this episode 2, where it picks up, we get introduced to a new pair of nobles who seem to be investigating like these humans who have like got scientific enhancements on their bodies to have similar powers to the nobles. And these nobles seem to be very young, because when they see Rizal, they don't recognize him. And if Rizal was at one point in time, or I guess still is, the protector of all nobles, you would think they would recognize him, unless they're just too young to have met him. I don't know how nobles reproduce or anything like that, but I'm just assuming these new nobles were either made or born, or however new nobles get created. after, you know, Raizo slept for 800 and something years. Just how strong is Han? Like, this dude seems way more capable in a fight than a normal human should be. Even though we saw him get his ass kicked in the first episode, in episode 2, he's taking out a whole gang by himself with Raizo and the other noble just watching. Like, I don't need your help. He just takes out an entire gang. He's getting beat with pipes and everything. Doesn't care. Just taking dudes out left and right. He seems to know some kind of martial art, and he just can hold his own within a fight. It really leads me to believe that he has some kind of latent ability where maybe he's like a distant relative of a noble, or like a descendant of a noble, or something like that. I just have to think there's something with his character that makes him special, where he's so capable in a fight, because he seems to be able to do way more than a normal human should be able to do, and he seems way more durable than a normal human is. So I just have to think we're gonna find out something about his character where he just has more latent abilities or more potential as far as strength than regular humans do. This episode had some fairly decent comedy. The banter between Regis and M21 was actually pretty funny. Now, their dynamic is by no means original, but it's a time-tested formula, and it works in this episode too. Just two characters who don't like each other, constantly going back and forth with the words. And it's a time-tested formula, but it's usually pretty funny as long as it's done correctly, and it's done pretty well in this episode. It's believable that they don't like each other, but they're not willing to actually try to kill each other. They're just like just going back and forth, being like friendly assholes, I guess, if that makes sense. So I found it funny. Now, Frankenstein's reactions to having people over at his apartment, and so many people living in his apartment now, that was hilarious. That was the reaction of a man who has come accustomed to living by himself and having everything where he wants it and having everything be the way he likes it, and now that's just all disrupted, and he's struggling with that. And I felt that. I really felt that, where this dude has his own space. He's used to having his own space, and now that space is gone, and he's just along for the ride. Yeah, that I was laughing pretty hard. That scene it's so relatable, even though we're watching a show with a character called Frankenstein and with other characters that are basically vampires, even though they don't call them vampires, but they seem to be vampires. Even though we're watching a show about that, hey, you still have relatable moments where you have a guy who's just used to living by himself, and now he's not by himself anymore, and he has to adjust to having all these people in his apartment. Yeah, funny. Now that I have the requisite information about what the hell is going on, Noblesse is a lot more enjoyable, and the introduction of more nobles makes the world of the show feel even bigger, and I look forward to seeing how these nobles react to when they find out who Raizo really is, or if another noble who's actually old enough is going to remember who Raizo is, and how that dynamic is going to work. Is he have to like retake his position as Noblesse? Is that something you lose after you've been away for a while, or you always the Noblesse? Like, how does that work? I guess we'll find out as the show goes on, but I am enjoying the show a lot more now that I watched the OVA and I know what the hell is going on. Alright guys, that's all I have for you on this one. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up. If you didn't, let me know why in the comments. And if you are so inclined, subscribe. Again, I would appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.